You've seen the movies, you've read the books, the lone survivor, the guy who makes it work all by himself. No dependencies, no liabilities, just you, your skills, and your rugged individualism against the wasteland. Let me ask you something that's going to make you uncomfortable. How long do you think you can stay awake? 48 hours? 72 if you're pumped full of adrenaline and caffeine? Maybe 96 hours before you start hallucinating and your body just shuts down whether you want it to or not. Here's what I know with absolute certainty. 99% of people who think they're going to lone wolf a collapse scenario will be dead within 30 days. Not wounded, not struggling, dead. And the 1% who make it past 30 days? They're not thriving. They're barely surviving. They're one twisted ankle, one bout of food poisoning, one infected cut away from joining the 99%. The lone wolf survivalist is a fantasy sold to you by Hollywood and prepper influencers who've never spent more than a weekend in the woods. It's a power fantasy for people who don't understand the brutal mathematics of extended survival. Today I'm going to show you exactly why solo survival is tactical suicide. I'm going to run the numbers on sleep deprivation, injury probability, division of labor, and psychological breakdown. I'm going to explain why the actual survivors throughout human history have always been groups, tribes, and communities. And I'm going to give you the uncomfortable homework of figuring out who your tribe is right now, before you need them. You can keep scrolling and maintain your lone wolf fantasy. Or you can spend the next 22 minutes learning why the 0.1% who actually make it through extended collapse scenarios do it together, not alone. If you want to be part of that 0.1% who understand how survival actually works, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with your answer to this question. How many people are in your trusted circle right now? Let's get tactical. Let's start with the problem nobody wants to talk about. Sleep. You need approximately 8 hours of sleep per night to maintain cognitive function and physical health. That's not me being soft. That's biology. Your body requires sleep to consolidate memories, repair tissue, regulate hormones, and maintain immune function. In a collapse scenario, you're operating in a hostile environment where threats can materialize 24 hours a day. Desperate people don't clock out at 5 p.m. Looters don't take weekends off. Wildlife doesn't check your sleep schedule before deciding you look like dinner. So here's your math problem. If you're alone and you need 8 hours of sleep, that's 8 hours per day when you are completely defenseless. 1/3 of your life. 8 hours when anyone can walk up to your shelter, spot your security weaknesses, and make plans. 8 hours when a leak can flood your supplies, a fire can consume your shelter, or an injury can turn from manageable to fatal. But it gets worse because you can't actually get those 8 hours, because you're alone. So you set alarms. You wake up every 90 minutes to do perimeter checks. You train yourself to sleep light, startling awake at every sound. Congratulations, you've just guaranteed chronic sleep deprivation. Within 72 hours, your reaction time is equivalent to being legally drunk. Within a week, you're experiencing micro-sleeps, brief moments where your brain just shuts off without your consent. Within 2 weeks, you're making decisions that would be obviously stupid if you were well-rested. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in practice. Day 12 of your solo survival scenario. You've been rationing sleep, grabbing 3 to 4 hours at a time. You're heating water for dehydrated food. Simple task. Except your exhausted brain forgets that you set the pot on your camp stove 15 minutes ago. You nod off for 90 seconds. You wake up to boiling water overflowing, your stove fuel wasted, and if you're unlucky, a fire starting in your shelter. Or maybe you're doing perimeter patrol at 3 a.m. You're scanning the tree line. You've been awake for 19 hours because you couldn't sleep during the day due to heat. Your brain starts filling in shadows that aren't there. You waste ammunition shooting at a threat that doesn't exist. Now you've given away your position and depleted resources because your sleep-deprived brain is literally malfunctioning. The lone wolf doesn't die in a blaze of glory. The lone wolf dies because he falls asleep at the wrong time. Now let's talk about the second problem that kills the fantasy. Injury and illness. Pop quiz. You're chopping firewood. The axe glances off a knot in the wood and buries itself 2 inches into your calf. You're alone. What's your plan? Here's what happens to Mr. Lone Wolf. He applies a tourniquet if he's smart and has one accessible. He cleans and bandages the wound if he's not in shock. Then he's immobilized, can't walk properly, can't patrol, can't hunt, can't gather firewood, can't defend his position effectively. He's operating at maybe 30% capacity for the next 2 to 3 weeks if the wound doesn't get infected. And here's the kicker. That injury happened during a routine task. Now apply that same math to the actually dangerous situations you'll face. Let's run the numbers on illness. In a post-collapse scenario, you're drinking water that you filter or boil yourself, you're eating food that might be past its prime, you're exposed to weather extremes, you're under constant psychological stress, which tanks your immune system. You're probably not getting adequate nutrition because you're rationing supplies. The average person gets sick 2 to 3 times per year under normal conditions. Under survival stress, that number doubles, so figure on being sick 4 to 6 times per year. Maybe it's a stomach bug that has you puking and shitting for 3 days while you can barely stay hydrated. Maybe it's a respiratory infection that leaves you weak and feverish for a week. Maybe it's a simple cold that wouldn't matter in normal times, but in your depleted state, it hits you like a freight train. Who's gathering water while you're too sick to stand? Who's maintaining your shelter security? Who's cooking food you probably can't eat anyway? Who's making sure you don't die of dehydration because you can't keep fluids down? Nobody. Because you're alone. Because you chose the fantasy. Let me teach you something they don't cover in survival manuals. Division of labor isn't a luxury. It's the fundamental technology that allowed humans to dominate this planet. One person can perform maybe 3 survival tasks adequately per day. Not well. Adequately. Let's be generous and say you're efficient. You wake up. Task 1. Water procurement and purification. That's 2 to 3 hours depending on your source and method. Task 2. Food acquisition. Whether that's hunting, trapping, fishing, or foraging. That's 4 to 6 hours for anything approaching success. Task 3. Firewood collection and fire maintenance. 2 hours minimum. We're already at 8 to 11 hours of physical labor. You haven't done any shelter maintenance, you haven't worked on longer-term food preservation, you haven't maintained your tools and equipment, you haven't done any security improvements, you haven't scouted for better resources. You haven't addressed that leak in your roof. You haven't reinforced that weak point in your perimeter. And remember, you still need those 8 hours of sleep you're not getting. Now contrast that with a group of 4 people. 4 people who trust each other and have complementary skills. Person 1 specializes in water and sanitation. They become expert at filtration systems, rainwater collection, waste management. Person 2 handles food acquisition. They pattern animal behavior, maintain traps, identify edible plants. Person 3 manages security and perimeter. They understand defensive positions, threat assessment, watch rotations. Person 4 handles infrastructure and logistics. They maintain shelter, preserve food, manage supplies, repair equipment. Suddenly you have specialization. You have someone who's actually good at each critical task instead of someone who's barely adequate at everything. You have redundancy. If the water specialist gets sick, the others have watched them work and can maintain the system. You have force multiplication. 4 people can defend a position that 1 person can't hold for even an hour. And here's what really changes the game. Continuous security. With 4 people, you can run 6-hour watch rotations. Everyone gets a solid night's sleep. Everyone stays sharp. Nobody's making stupid decisions because their brain is eating itself from exhaustion. But there's something even more important than the practical benefits. There's the psychology. Let me tell you about what happens to the human mind in extended isolation. Not the romanticized version. The actual neuroscience. Your brain is a social organ. It evolved in tribal groups of 50 to 150 people. It expects social interaction the same way it expects food and water. When you remove social contact, you're not just lonely. You're experiencing a form of physiological stress that cascades through every system in your body. Week 1 alone. You're fine. You're focused. You're in mission mode. Week 2. You start talking to yourself. Not a little. A lot. You narrate your actions. You have full conversations with imaginary people. Week 3. You start assigning personalities to inanimate objects. That's not cute. That's your brain desperately trying to create the social stimulation it needs. Week 4. The paranoia starts. Every sound is a threat. Every shadow is an enemy. Your threat assessment becomes unreliable because your brain is operating in permanent crisis mode without the social feedback to calibrate what's actually dangerous. Month 3. You're experiencing auditory hallucinations, voices that aren't there, footsteps that don't exist. Your brain is literally manufacturing the social input it's being denied. Month 6. If you've made it this far, you're not the same person. Your decision-making is compromised. Your emotional regulation is shot. You're either hypervigilant to the point of exhaustion or dangerously apathetic. And here's what nobody talks about. The survivor who makes it 12 months alone isn't successful. They're broken. They're dealing with trauma that will take years to process if they ever rejoin society. They survived, but they paid a price that makes you question whether survival was worth it. Contrast that with a group. Social interaction provides hope. It provides purpose beyond mere survival. It provides the emotional regulation that keeps you sane. The ability to share your fear with someone who understands. The dark humor that makes impossible situations bearable. The moments of genuine laughter that remind you why you're fighting to survive in the first place. Now let's address the knowledge problem. Pop quiz. Can you suture a wound? Can you set a broken bone? Can you identify 50 edible plants in your region and distinguish them from their poisonous lookalikes? Can you trap, clean, and preserve meat? Can you repair a water filtration system when it fails? Can you diagnose and treat infections without antibiotics? Can you navigate by stars? Can you maintain firearms and ammunition reloading equipment? Can you garden in depleted soil? Can you preserve food without refrigeration? Can you identify structural damage that makes a building unsafe? If you answered yes to all of those, you're lying. No single person possesses all the skills necessary for extended survival. You might be good at 2 or 3 domains. You might be adequate at a few more. But you have critical gaps. And those gaps will kill you. A group distributes knowledge. Your medic knows medicine. Your hunter knows game. Your engineer knows infrastructure. Your botanist knows plants. Suddenly, you have a collective intelligence that exceeds what any individual can achieve. And here's the multiplier effect. That knowledge transfers. Your medic teaches basic first aid to everyone. Your hunter teaches tracking. Your engineer teaches basic repairs. The group becomes more resilient because everyone cross-trains. The lone wolf has to learn everything through trial and error, and in a survival situation, error means death. So here's the uncomfortable question you've been avoiding this entire time. Who's your tribe? Because here's the paradox. You need a tribe. But building a tribe requires trust, and trust makes you vulnerable. This is the actual hard problem of survival. Not gear, not skills. Trust. You can't survive alone. But the wrong group will get you killed faster than going solo. Someone who panics, someone who steals supplies, someone who can't pull their weight, someone who attracts threats through stupid decisions, someone who decides your resources look better than theirs. So you need to choose carefully. And you need to choose now. Not when the collapse happens, not when you're desperate. Now. Here's your homework. Make a list of people you trust. Not people you like. Not people you work with. People you trust. People who have skills you lack. People who think clearly under pressure. People who keep their word. People who have a work ethic. People who can handle ugly truths without falling apart. That list should be short. Quality over quantity. 3 to 6 people is optimal. More than 8 and you start getting group dysfunction and factions. Next, you need to actually talk to these people. Not hypothetically, not, wouldn't it be crazy if... Actual conversation about what happens when things fall apart, where you meet up, what everyone brings, what the rules are, who's in charge of what. Most people won't have that conversation. It's awkward. It sounds paranoid. It requires acknowledging that civilization might not be permanent. Congratulations, you think like the 99%. The 1% who have that conversation discover who's actually reliable. They discover that half the people they thought they could count on will ghost them rather than engage with uncomfortable reality. They discover that 1 or 2 people they barely knew are absolutely solid and ready to plan seriously. And the 0.1% who actually implement the plan, who do the tabletop exercises, who establish caches and rally points and communication protocols, who train together and solve problems together before their life or death problems, those are the people who survive. Let's be clear about something. This doesn't make you invincible. Nothing makes you invincible. A prepared group has better odds than a lone wolf. Better odds, not guarantees. You can do everything right and still lose because someone in your group makes a fatal mistake. Because another group is bigger and more violent. Because you get sick at the wrong time despite having a medic. Because luck just runs out. And here's the dark truth that keeps me up at night. At some point, if things get bad enough for long enough, you're going to face the question of who else you help and who you turn away. Because your resources are finite, your security is fragile. Every additional person is another mouth to feed, another body that might carry disease, another potential threat to your group's survival. Do you help the family with young children who show up desperate and starving? Maybe they're genuinely in need. Maybe they're bait for an ambush. Do you risk your tribe's survival for strangers? Do you become the kind of person who can turn away a hungry child? There's no right answer. Just trade-offs. Just decisions you'll have to live with. But here's what I can tell you with certainty. You make those decisions better as a group than alone. Because the weight gets distributed. Because you have other perspectives. Because you maintain your humanity through shared ethical burden. The lone wolf doesn't make noble decisions. The lone wolf goes feral, loses perspective, stops seeing other humans as humans, becomes the threat they feared. Here's your choice right now, in this moment, while civilization still functions and you still have options. You can keep scrolling through prepper content fantasizing about being the lone survivor. You can stock your bunker with freeze-dried food and ammunition and convince yourself that's enough. You can maintain the comfortable delusion that you'll figure it out when the time comes. 99% will do exactly that. They'll prepare their gear, they'll train their skills, they'll forget the most important prep of all, people. Or you can open a new tab right now and start making that list. 3 to 6 names. People you actually trust. Then you can do the uncomfortable work of having the conversation, setting the meeting, making the plan, doing the prep that actually matters. Map the rally points in your area. Identify which of your people has which skills. Figure out the gaps. Start cross-training. Establish caches. Create communication protocols that don't depend on infrastructure. Run scenarios together. Learn to work as a unit before you have to. 99% won't do this. It requires acknowledging uncomfortable reality. It requires vulnerability. It requires effort while life is comfortable. 1% will think about it seriously. 0.1% will actually do it. The lone wolf myth is comfortable because it asks nothing of you except to buy gear and watch videos. Building a tribe is hard. It requires social skills and emotional intelligence and the ability to have difficult conversations. It requires admitting you can't do it alone. But it's the only prep that actually matters. Because when everything falls apart, you're not going to die from lack of equipment. You're going to die from lack of backup, from lack of relief, from lack of shared burden, from lack of human connection. Class dismissed.